Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredible and, frankly, often completely overlooked endgame of World War II in China. We usually hear all about the island hopping and those massive naval battles in the Pacific, right? But the source material we've gathered points to a totally different, gripping story: the sheer, unimaginable scale of the air war over mainland China. It's a tale of immense sacrifice, absolutely impossible odds, and a deeply controversial leader. So, let's get right into it.
Okay, to really understand the desperation in the skies over central China back in 1943, you have to look at the staggering odds. American pilots were routinely outnumbered 1-3. Sometimes it was as bad as 1-5 against the Japanese Air Force. I mean, this was literally not a fair fight. But here's the wild part. During one specific 8-day stretch, those vastly outnumbered American flyers confirmed 62 Japanese fighters shot down, and they only lost 3 of their own. 3! So how on earth do you sustain those kinds of operations under that intense pressure? Well, it all traces back to a highly pivotal moment in Washington.
Take a look at these words from General George Marshall. He said, "It was a no-brainer to give aid to Chennault. Did it make any military sense? Of course not. Did it make political sense? Absolutely." This perfectly captures a profound truth about warfare. Strategy is often driven just as much by political necessity as it is by military logic. You see, President Roosevelt knew keeping China in the fight was absolutely essential to defeating Japan. It didn't matter if the military math perfectly added up. Politically, it had to happen.
Section 1. A high-stakes political gamble. The White House Showdown of April 1943.
Now, to understand how we got to those impossible combat odds, we have to look at a massive clash of egos in Washington, D.C. On one side, you've got General Joseph Stilwell. He's arguing fiercely for infantry equipment and, quite bluntly, dismissing Chinese leader Chiang Kai-shek as an ignorant peasant and a worthless ally. Then, on the complete opposite side, sits General Claire Chennault. He's demanding planes for air power and calling Chiang one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century. Facing this completely polarized advice, Roosevelt had a tough choice to make. He ultimately sided with Chennault, which officially allowed the 14th Air Force to finally take the offensive.
Moving on to Section 2, Brotherhood in the Skies. Let's look at how they survived this unprecedented air war. So with Chennault off the leash, the dynamic of the war drastically changes, and an incredible bond is forged in the air. Even against terrible odds, American pilots were shot down actually had a remarkably high survival rate. Why? It's because of something called blood chits. These were literal notices worn right on the backs of the pilots' flight jackets. Written in Chinese, they clearly identified the wearer as an American friend fighting for China. And these were backed up by posters secretly circulated, even deep inside Japanese-occupied territory, urging ordinary citizens to help any foreign pilot who fell from the sky.
And to truly grasp the weight the Chinese government put behind those blood chits, you have to look at the reward, a staggering $100,000 US. To put that into perspective, that's roughly $2 million in today's money just for rescuing a single flyer. This highlighted a huge strategic reality for the Allies. Highly trained, combat-experienced pilots were infinitely more valuable than the metal airplanes they were flying.
To see just how vital this civilian network was on the ground, take the incredible story of pilot John R. Allison. So Allison successfully shoots down 3 Japanese bombers in a single minute during a completely chaotic night battle, right? He's using only moonlight and rudimentary radar to guide him. But his plane gets crippled, forcing a crash landing right into the Zhangjiang River. Dazed, struggling to survive, he's actually fished out of the water by a young Chinese boy on a simple log raft. And in just an unbelievable twist of fate, 20 years later, Allison actually met that same boy again, this time as an employee at his own company. It's personal stories like this that bring the massive, abstract scale of this war down to a profoundly human level.
That fierce on-the-ground cooperation soon evolved into a formal military structure with the creation of the Chinese-American Composite Wing, or CACW. This was a true brotherhood. It was fully operational by October 1943 and featured a completely joint command structure. Chinese and American pilots were literally flying side by side in a single unit, and their coordinated strikes absolutely devastating. Just look at Thanksgiving Day 1943. They pulled off a daring raid on the Japanese airfield at Hinshu. They completely shocked the defenders, destroying over 70 enemy planes on the ground. The craziest part? They did it without losing a single plane themselves.
Which brings us to Section 3, the unsung Chinese heroes, civilian sacrifice on the ground.
While the pilots were winning glory up in the air, achieving those victories required immense, and I mean immense, sacrifice on the ground.
This birthed what Chennault called the Hydra airfield phenomenon. It worked like this. When U.S. forces had to retreat, they'd blow massive craters in their own runways to make them totally useless. But as soon as the Japanese army advanced away from the site, tens of thousands of local Chinese civilians would rush right back in. Working day and night, they would literally flatten their own farmlands and rebuild the airfields entirely by hand. So within mere days, U.S. planes were launching again from bases the enemy thought were totally destroyed. It was just like the mythical Hydra, cut off one head and another grows right back.
But we really have to pause here, because the true heartbreaking reality of this conflict is encapsulated by a single survivor's memory. Decades later, at a reunion, a Chinese veteran recounted a story about hiding a downed American pilot inside a tunnel. Also hiding in that tunnel was a Chinese mother with her small baby. As Japanese patrols searched literally right above them, the baby started to cry. Knowing that discovery meant certain death for the pilot, the mother, and everyone else hiding there, she covered her baby's mouth to muffle the sound. Well, when the soldiers finally left, she realized she had accidentally smothered her own child. It's a devastating story, but it's absolutely crucial to understanding the unimaginable human cost these civilians paid.
And that absolute, unwavering resolve of the Chinese people? It's perfectly captured in this jaw-dropping letter. It was sent to Chennault by a Chinese refugee, and it came with a map and a 20,000 cash donation. This civilian was literally personally funding the bombing of his own occupied hometown. He wrote, "You may drop bombs on my house, but be careful, do not hurt my neighbors. Please take your operations during the Spring Festival, because I do not want the Japs to enjoy the festival." I mean, wow. The commitment there is just astounding. Section 4. Turning the Tide, Operation Ichigo and the Air Supremacy Shift. That incredible grassroots support really set the stage for 1944. That's when Japan launched Operation Ichigo, a massive ground offensive designed to wipe out the Allied air bases for good. But despite losing ground bases, the U.S. Air Force retaliated with overwhelming force. In the Hanko air raid of December 1944, General Curtis LeMay and Chennault planned an unprecedented strike using B-29 super fortresses, launching all the way from Chengdu. Right behind the bombers, 200 fighters from the 14th Air Force swept in. The result of this massive operation? 64 Japanese planes destroyed, and again, 0 U.S. losses. Total air supremacy had officially shifted.
Amidst this shifting tide of war, the human element of our explainer comes back into focus with a pretty unexpected wartime romance. The 54-year-old General Chennault actually met and fell in love with Anna Chen, a 19-year-old reporter. What started out as hero worship evolved into a deep romance, adding some very intense personal stakes to his mission in China.
So, under Chennault's controversial but highly effective leadership, the strategic transformation was absolute. As we can see, they went from being a desperately outnumbered defensive unit facing 1-to-5 odds in early 1943 into an overwhelming force by early 1945. We're talking over 500 fighters and 100 bombers, enjoying complete air mastery. They totally swept the Japanese from the skies.
Section 5. A bittersweet departure. Victory denied.
Yet just as absolute victory was practically right there in their hands, the narrative takes a really sudden, bittersweet turn for General Chennault. In April 1945, his greatest political champion, President Roosevelt, passes away. Left without that protection in Washington, his long-standing rivals forced him to resign by that summer. So on August 8th, just days before Japan actually surrenders, Chennault departs China. And when the war officially ends in September, the man who fought tirelessly for China wasn't even included in the treaty signing on the USS Missouri. It was a heartbreakingly swift ousting.
Section 6. The Flying Tiger's Legacy, Echoes in Arlington.
Now, even though his immediate post-war years were totally tangled up in the complex politics of the era, Chennault's historical legacy outlasted all of that. Today, nothing represents his permanent tie to the people he fought for better than his grave at Arlington National Cemetery. It is literally the only tombstone in the entire cemetery featuring Chinese characters carved on the back. But we can't just talk about the generals. We absolutely must remember the rank and file. More than 2,000 American airmen lost their lives in China during this conflict. Their planes vanished into the clouds, sank into the rivers, and crashed onto those hand-built farmlands thousands of miles from home, all to secure a victory that history, for a long time, kind of forgot. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought. When you look past all the high-level politics and the clashing egos in Washington, you find ordinary people crossing massive cultural divides to literally save each other's lives. So I have to ask,
How do the shared grassroots sacrifices of everyday citizens and unsung heroes shape the foundation of modern international relations today? It's a profound question and definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you next time.